New Orleans Saints shake up the 2025 NFL Draft and acquire the number one pick so they can select Miami quarterback Cam Ward? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott McNair, injury lawyers. Have been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, heard offshore. Scott McNair handles it all. You can call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. The Saints right now are picking number 9 in the 2025 NFL Draft, but at this rate, it wouldn't surprise us if they move up, and who knows, maybe select Miami quarterback Cam Ward. That's been the buzz the last 24 hours for the Saints, all kind of materialized with the Saints traveling to Miami for their pro day with Kellen Moore, with Nussmeier, with Staley. So you bring your coordinators along, you bring your head coach for the next, let's say, 3 years minimum into the Miami pro day. You get a look at Cam Ward. Cam Ward finishes his workout with an insane kind of 50 yards in the air fadeaway throw, which, all right, maybe that gives you kind of shades of Zach Wilson, which might not be the best thing in the world, but he did have an impressive pro day, and obviously his college career and the 3 stops he had were incredibly impressive, and that's why he is the number 1 quarterback in the upcoming draft. The question will be for the Saints, are they able to make an intriguing enough offer to the Tennessee Titans? And that is the first and biggest hurdle to this equation. Because I think for the Saints to go out there and go to the pro day and them to even have kind of whispers about showing, intriguing Cam Ward, I don't think they're scouting him for reasons outside of wanting him for their own team. It's not like the Panthers are drafting him. It's not like the Falcons are drafting him. It's not like the Buccaneers are drafting him. You're taking a hard look at Cam Ward, trying to see if he can be your quarterback of the future. The problem is there are not a lot, but there are some teams that have a way bigger need at quarterback than the New Orleans Saints, and the Tennessee Titans are one of them. And right now they have the number 1 pick, and there really is no motive to move out of that number 1 pick if they like Cam Ward, and honestly, if they love Cam Ward. So let's say they don't love Cam Ward, and let's say Tennessee's willing to move that number 1 pick. What would it cost the New Orleans Saints? That is the question. And I think for this particular situation, the best example, in my opinion, is going to look at what happened when the Panthers and the Bears made that trade, and the Panthers moved up to get Bryce Young from Alabama, and the Bears moved back, and then the next year were able to take Caleb Williams out of USC. So what did that trade look like? Well, when the Panthers traded for the number 1 pick, they were picking number 9 just like the Saints, and they gave up pick number 9, DJ Moore, a second-round pick in that draft, which was number 61 overall, which was a late second-rounder, a 2024 first-round pick, which ended up being the number 1 overall pick so they could select Caleb Williams, and then a 2025 second-round pick. That's everything you gave up to move from 9 all the way to 1, which is what the Saints are going to have to do. So if the Saints were to move up and get the number 1 pick and select Cam Ward from Miami, in my opinion, a trade probably has to look something like this. The number 9 overall pick, Chris Olave, pick 71, which is a third-round pick for the Saints, their next first-round pick in 2024, and then either a 2025 second-round pick or a 2025 third-round pick. I think that part comes down to where do you value Chris Olave as opposed to where was DJ Moore valued when the Bears and Panthers made their trade back for Bryce Young. So, again, 2025 first-round pick, which is pick 9, 2026 first-round pick, your pick 71, which is your third-round pick, Chris Olave. This is probably what you're giving up. And it seems like a lot, and it is a lot. But if you're trying to get your quarterback of the future, you probably have to trade a ton. So the question becomes, are you willing to part ways with 2 first-round picks, 2 day 2 picks, and Chris Olave to select Cam Ward? That, to me, is going to be the question. And I think this is the way I break it down. If Kellen Moore came into the Saints building, was like, this is my quarterback, I need Cam Ward, I think you make the trade if it is presentable for you. Again, Tennessee would have to accept it. I don't think they would. I think Tennessee's going to take Cam Ward themselves. But if Tennessee was ready to move on and they saw that trade package and they said, hey, we're cool with it, you make that deal if you believe that is your quarterback of the future. That's what it always comes down to, in my opinion. If Kellen Moore believes he could win with that guy, you make the deal. Again, I don't believe this is going to happen because I think Tennessee's got to take Cam Ward, and they're going to, and they got to kind of jumpstart their rebuilding process. But it would be fascinating. And for anyone really frustrated about that, I've always said you cannot put a price on a franchise quarterback. If you believe he is the guy, You say, screw everything else, and you go get the guy. I don't believe the Saints are going to get Cam Ward, but man, if you have that conviction, then you go and you make an aggressive offer and try to make the move. I will say it is becoming very apparent the Saints are looking for their quarterback of the future. I don't believe they feel like they have their quarterback of the future on the roster right now, and I think that's probably the smart way to approach it. And obviously with Derek Carr, this is really your stopgap at the moment till you get to what's next. But as far as the trade goes, when I mentioned that projected deal, because I think this is what it would look like, right? The 2 first, Chris Olave, and 2 day 2 picks. I think a lot of people are going to get caught up in, oh man, I don't want to even trade Chris Olave and all those picks. The Chris Olave situation is interesting because I think Chris Olave is obviously a really, really good football player. And I don't think there's a question about whether or not he's a productive player for the Saints. He's one of their best players. If I were to rank the 5 best players in the Saints, Chris Olave is easily in that 5. The question for the Saints, though, becomes, are you comfortable paying him T. Higgins money or Brandon Ayuk money when he does have the concerning injury history that he has? And I think for the Saints, if the answer is no, then it makes it a little bit easier to use him as a trade chip of moving up in the draft. But it all comes down to that factor. And I think for the Saints, we'll see what happens regardless. That's a situation that even if they don't trade for the number 1 pick, we're going to discuss Chris Olave's future at some point because I think that is just the nature of it, right? Wide receiver market's kind of booming at the moment when it comes to the financials, and Chris Olave is obviously going to be due for a big contract at some point. The question will be whether or not the Saints are the team that dishes that contract out to him. So again, we'll see what happens. I'd say for New Orleans, though, keep an eye out on the quarterback situation because they clearly are looking for that next guy. I know Derek Carr is their starting quarterback for next season. We haven't even heard a peep from Derek Carr. We haven't heard about his thoughts on Kellen Moore. We haven't heard about his thoughts on the 2025 roster. And look, I don't think the Saints are trading Derek Carr, but man, it just feels like there is that kind of friction anyway. So you go out there, you get your young quarterback, you kind of get to move on from Carr in the process too, would probably make things a little bit lighter from a locker room perspective. So we'll see. I think that's just an added nuance to this whole situation. But I do think when it comes to Cam Ward and his future, not just in the NFL, I think for the Saints, he's the type of quarterback where I think the NFL is kind of gravitating towards guys that can kind of give you those home run plays at any moment, are always trying to push the ball downfield, which Cam does, incredible amount. Eyes are always downfield, which I do love about that with him. And I think for the Saints, there is that desire to move on from what they've had and go towards where the league is shifting. And he would do that. And look, I think for Kellen Moore, at some point, you're going to have to get him as quarterback. And maybe you don't want to mortgage all your pieces right now to make that deal. And I would understand that concern, especially when next year's quarterback class is supposed to be really good. Within the next 2 seasons, though, and I'm including this as one of those 2, Kellen Moore's got to get his quarterback in the future because if Kellen Moore doesn't get his quarterback and get his selection of who he wants running his offense, then the whole kind of process is broken. Because I think you have to make sure when you bring in your regime and you're trying to build something from the ground up, they got to have their kind of architect to run everything. And I think that's where you need your quarterback. If you don't, and Kellen Moore just kind of working with, spare parts and scraps, I don't know how this thing's going to get going. So we've seen him have success with Jalen Hurts. We've seen him have success with Dak Prescott. Obviously, just had the 1 year with Justin Herbert. And truthfully, it wasn't really Justin Herbert's best year. It's one of his worst. So I think for him, got to get Kellen his quarterback. Is Cam Ward his quarterback? We'll see. But he's not the only quarterback, obviously, in this class. Shador is obviously going to be someone that's mentioned. Jackson Dart's been mentioned, although with those 2, in my opinion, there isn't as much upside. I think with Cam Ward, there is that fear that this player doesn't work out because quarterback position is so hard to predict anyway, and you really can't analyze it as well as other spots. But I do think Cam Moore has star potential. I think Shador reminds me a little bit, and this is no knock because I think the quarterback I mentioned is a very, very good distributor of the football, and he runs an offense at a high level. Shador kind of reminds me of Jared Goff, where it's like pretty good throw of the football, pretty accurate, always on time. You know what you're getting. And that's what I kind of see when I watch Shador. And then, obviously with a ton of swag. And then when it comes to Jackson Dart, I think Jackson Dart is that quarterback where he can spin it, but I've always felt like I've been underwhelmed in the big games with Jackson Dart. Doesn't matter who they faced. I've never felt really confident about him in those spots. So it's a little bit of a tough proposition. Again, the Saints don't even have to go quarterback at 9. The Saints can go wide receiver. They can go defensive line. They can go out there and get O-line, although I'd probably steer clear of O-line. And I think for the Saints, you're kind of heading towards that direction anyway. But I think you're looking at wide receiver. I think that you're looking at probably defensive help. So we'll see where the Saints go. But man, the Cam Ward situation would be fascinating. So we're going to keep it rolling here, guys. If you have any comments, we'll get into them. Denzel saying good morning. Chris from the Bahamas. Man, for the Bahamas, I hope you're having a great time, man. Who dat? Jerry saying morning. Play it cool. Stay at 9. It's going to be discussion that a lot of Saints fans are going to be having and debating about it, whether or not they believe Cam Ward is worth trading up for. And look, I think mortgaging your future for a quarterback is really scary. And I think it's even scarier when you're in the Saints position, because I've always said this. If you are a casual NFL fan, what would be your motive for watching the New Orleans Saints? Like, who is that player that you turn on the TV and you're like, well, I can't wait to watch this guy, show out for the Saints? I don't know who that guy is. And the reason I say that is if I pick out any real bad team in the league, or not any, but pick out a couple, there are players that you're going to gravitate towards. So I'll take the Patriots, for example, right? Like, look, man, Drake May is an exciting quarterback prospect that they have in the building, and Christian Gonzalez is one of the best corners in the NFL, period. And those would be reasons to want to watch the Patriots. Doesn't mean they're fun, but those would be reasons. What are the Saints? A lot of their known players are aging. A lot of their players that are young and exciting haven't hit their stride yet. I think Chris Olave is a very exciting player, but he has missed a good amount of time. I think Rashid Shaheed's an exciting player. He has missed a decent amount of time. So the Saints don't really have a lot of blue chips. And if you mortgage your future for a quarterback, the odds of you having a ton of picks, they're not going to be there, at least for the next 2 years. You're kind of shortened your ammo because you went all in on pick number 1. So that is the concern, especially for the Saints, where they don't have a lot of draft capital at the moment and they don't have a lot of young players on the roster where you feel like now's the moment to go all in. The counterpoint, though, the way the Saints are currently operated, the way the Saints look roster construction, they're not picking number 1 next year anyway. So at some point, the Saints are going to have to make a move. At some point, they're going to have to make the move and push all the chips to the center of the table, go for it, and either be broke or double up on their money in no time. And it all comes down to whether or not you hit on the quarterback. If you hit on the quarterback, no one gives a crap what you gave up. But it is definitely a concern in that regard. Margaret says, what about taking Jackson Dart instead? Look, I think it all comes down to where you're grading people. If you believe that, Jackson Dart is not far off from Cam Ward and the way you evaluated them was very close, then yeah, then you take Dart. You don't go for Cam Ward. You don't invest all those prospects. I think that makes sense. But I just think there is a gap, and I think every NFL team right now has a gap between Cam Ward and then whoever the next quarterback is, whether you have Shador, whether you have Jackson Dart third. I do think there is that gap. So I'm not disagreeing with the idea of, hey, if you take Jackson Dart, you don't have to give up a lot. But, I do believe that there is that difference between the two prospects. Jerry says we need a big-bodied wide receiver. I totally agree. And look, they added wide receiver help last week with Brandon Cooks, but that isn't the wide receiver you bring in that fits that need, right? You're actually just getting smaller, still fast, still a lot of speed at the wide receiver position for the Saints. And I do definitely appreciate that aspect for New Orleans, but that is not the type of receiver that you're looking for, to your point, Jerry. And I think Tet McMillan's probably one of those guys that Saints fans are going to really want to see in the black and gold, and understandably so. He's a big receiver that I think would give this offense something they don't have. Tavia says, I seriously don't think Carr will be starting this year. I just find it odd that we haven't heard anything from Carr. I think he seriously wants out. He's just being super quiet about it. Yeah, look, I agree. And this is no shade, right? Because I remember when the Derek Carr trade rumors came out, there's a lot of kind of conflicting reports and sources. And, this isn't to knock anyone who's within the Saints know. Like, this situation, I think, if you believe Derek Carr's happy with where he's at right now, I think you're a little naive. He hasn't said a damn thing about this team, hasn't said anything about Kellen Moore. The only comment we got from the Carr family about Kellen Moore was Derek Carr's brother beefing with a post about Kellen Moore back at Boise State beating Fresno State when Derek was there. So it's the only comment we've gotten from the Carr family on Kellen Moore. We haven't heard anything about his thoughts on the future. We haven't really heard anything about him and his teammates. He wasn't in New Orleans for Super Bowl week, which, whether you want to think that's a big deal or not, let's say it's not a big deal. Let's just cross that out and say it's not a big deal. We have not heard from Derek Carr till the end of last season. And the only comment we got from Derek Carr was that he's not going to take a pay cut. And you know what? Kudos to him. He was honest. He did not take a pay cut. Normal restructure. gets his $40 million from the Saints anyway. So look, I think for Derek, he was more than eager to go out there and see what was on the open market. And if you look around the quarterback landscape of the NFL right now, it actually makes a lot of sense why he'd want to feel that way. Let's go through the teams. Giants signed Jameis Winston, but they're looking for more quarterback help. Giants could have been a landing spot for him. The Jets could have been a landing spot for him with Aaron Glenn. The Titans, for sure, right now, he feels like a quarterback that'd be in their wheelhouse of who they'd want to start if they weren't confident in taking one in the draft. So that's 3 options. Cleveland Browns clearly need a quarterback. That's a 4th option. Pittsburgh Steelers, that's a really nice option. There's your 5th. And then the one sleeper one, I think, would be the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I think the Vikings, at some point, you're going to have to hand over the keys to J.J. McCarthy. But I think when you see the Vikings attached to Aaron Rodgers briefly, and now the new quarterback they've been attached to has been Ryan Tannehill, it's pretty clear they want to get another vet in there. You bring Derek in. Derek gets a chance to play for a contending team for a little bit till they hand the keys over to J.J. McCarthy. There would have been options for Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr was hoping the Saints were just going to outright cut him. Hit the open market, see what's out there, pick his next team. I just think this marriage clearly hasn't worked for both parties. Hasn't worked for Derek Carr, hasn't worked for the Saints. And now you're in this really uncomfortable spot where your quarterback, who I always consider the quarterback face of the franchise, CEO of the team, regardless of whether or not they're good, like the quarterback is going to be the spokesperson of the team. And we haven't heard anything from him. So I believe if you want to say that's a respectful way of doing it, I don't disagree. I think Derek Carr wants out and is doing a pretty good job of saying, hey, if I got nothing good to say, I won't say it. And I do at some degree respect that, because I think the worst thing for the Saints would be Derek Carr starts causing a stir and, I don't want to be here. I want to get traded. And then the Saints have even more drama on their hands. So it's an interesting dynamic that I think at some point they're going to have to get an answer on. Jerry says, is there a tow truck available for broken down car? If yes, send one. Yellow Nose says, I would trade up for Cam Moore only if it meant that we would only give up this year's first and next year's. Anything more than that, I just don't know. I can't. Look, the problem is where you're picking. You're picking number 9. It's a big drop off to go from 1 to 9. So you're going to have to give up more than that. Like I said, if you're going for that, you're giving up pick number 9. You're giving up next year's first. I'd imagine you're giving up Chris Olave. And I'd imagine you're giving up 2 day 2 picks. Now, if you can tell me the Saints give up only 3rd round picks and you're going a 1 and a 3 this year, a 1 and a 3 next year, and Olave, I think I could do it. And for anyone, concerned about the Olave thing, just remember, you have to factor in that Olave is going to get paid soon. So if you're comfortable with the Saints paying Olave $30 million a year, cool. If you're not comfortable with it, it's all the more reason to include him in said trade package, because he is a very good football player and there is a lot of value with Chris Olave, and go from there. So again, I agree with you, man. Like if this could only be a 1 this year and a 1 next year, man, it'd be easy. Unfortunately, it's just not going to work out that way for the Saints. Just A. Davis says, build the roster and tank for Arch next season. Bring a Manning back home. I know that's definitely going to be a popular consensus for the Saints. I'd say the Giants too. Giants fans probably feel that same way right now. My counter argument for this situation for Arch would be, I'm not completely sold, not on him, on him leaving next year though. And the reason I say that is I've had, and this is just personal, like this isn't me bringing up shit. I've interviewed Archie Manning before, and I interviewed him before the start of the 2024 season. And I asked him about Arch being the backup again and what the process is and whether or not they're comfortable with Texas. And he told me to my face, and again, things change, plans change. When you're the projected number 1 pick, your timelines change. But he told me the ideal scenario is Arch gets 2 full seasons as the starting quarterback for the Longhorns. So there is still a good chance that Arch comes out next year. I'm not going to deny that, right? Like if Arch is the number 1 pick, I don't think you flirt with potential injury at the collegiate level. You don't. But if Arch didn't have the best season, or Arch was a little inconsistent and he's supposed to be maybe a mid-round first, or the 10th overall pick, whatever it may be, and I don't expect that to happen, right? I expect Arch to have a really nice year for Texas. Maybe you run it back in a year, and then what? What's your option for a team that, let's say, was holding out hope that he'd be available? So that's the only thing I would say. But I understand the sentiment behind that, right? You get a Manning in the Superdome again. First off, jersey sales will be through the roof, but people will be pretty excited about it. Yellow Nose says we got to rebuild some type of way. And let's be honest, what we've done so far is not a rebuild. It's more of a retool that will only get so far. I just have a nagging suspicion that we'll win just enough games to not have a high draft pick, but lose enough to not get into the postseason with this roster so far. I do agree with that. And I think that's kind of where the Saints have dug their heels in. A lot of people want the Saints to just say, hey, full rebuild, go for it. And the Saints keep telling you they don't want to do it. And I thought there'd be some veterans cut this year. Saints haven't cut a single guy, in my opinion, that was either still worth a damn in this league or from a sentimental value worth it to the fan base, right? The only real guys they've moved on from, all right, you moved on from Jamal Williams. Didn't exactly lose much there. You didn't move on from Colin Saunders. I thought they would. You didn't move on from Nathan Shepard. I thought you would. Didn't move on from Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan took a sizable pay cut. So salute to Cam Jordan. You didn't move on from Derek Carr. You didn't move on from DeMario Davis. You didn't move on from Tyrann Mathieu. So the Saints have kind of gone veterans. And even the signings that they had, right? You bring in Dylan Radins, you bring in Brandon Cooks. You're not exactly hitting the reset button from youth. You bring in Justin Reed. By the way, I love the Justin Reed mood. So don't take this the wrong way, because I think Justin Reed is going to be a player in this Saints defense. I think he's going to have a great year. And I love that signing. Value's good. You're getting him in the prime of his career. Love that deal for the New Orleans Saints. But even Justin Reed, you're getting Reed for, I believe, he'll be age 28, 29, 30 of that deal. So you're not exactly getting younger if you're the Saints. And that's not a knock on Justin Reed, by the way. Again, best move the Saints have made this offseason, in my opinion. I don't think it's close. But they haven't hit that reset button, to your point. I do believe that they're kind of, digging their heels in, want to compete while resetting. I don't think they want to rebuild. I think what they want to do is stay competitive and maybe do what the Bucs are doing. The problem is, and I've said this before, the Bucs model, there's a limit. There's a limit to how high you can get. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done a really good job of winning a bad division and resetting their cap post Tom Brady. I tip my cap to them for that. They've done a really good job. But when the playoffs start and the lights shine brightest, do you ever believe the Buccaneers are going to win a Super Bowl with their current roster? Fuck no. And I don't believe that's going to be the case for the Saints with their current roster. I don't know if the Saints can win a playoff game with their current roster. So that is my concern. I am not a big believer in blowing it up gets you anything. I've seen the Jets blow it up a million times. They're still blowing it up. I've seen the Jaguars blow it up a million times. The Jaguars have picked number one so many times in our lifetime. So many times. And they never get it right. So I'm not a big believer in that being the solution. Blowing up your roster, winning 2 games, that's going to fix your problem. I don't think that's going to fix your problem. But I do believe there needs to be a moment where you go for it, though. You're in the middle right now. You're kind of trying just to tread water, and I get that. At some point, whether it's this year or whether it's next year, the Saints are going to have to take a swing in the quarterback pool and go for it. And that's where things have to change. I have no problem with them trying to stay afloat, with them trying to put together a satisfiable product for their fans. I have no problem with that. But you're going to have to take a swing because you cannot keep running back the same team over and over again. Right now, you're running back the same team with a couple of tweaks. You bring in a Justin Reed, you bring in a Brandon Cooks, you re-sign Chase Young on a big deal, and obviously whoever you pick at number 9. That's going to be your selling point. But that's not enough to really move the needle. They're going to have to figure out a way to do it. And I do agree with you. I think where they're at right now, I don't see the Saints picking number 1 anyway. I don't see them picking top 5 anyway with his current roster. Matt says, it scares me mainly because any draft pick is not a guaranteed hit. So to forfeit that much capital to obtain one guy is not the smartest idea. However, it's a high risk, very high reward scenario. Yeah, look, I think for me, it's going to be a risk anyway. I think it's a risk whoever you're picking in this draft. I think that for the Saints, we've kind of seen over the years, we've seen them pick high. It hasn't worked. We've seen them pick low, and it has worked. The draft, unfortunately, you're kind of throwing darts at the board, seeing what sticks. And I do agree there is that concern of the forfeiting capital because then you have less darts to throw. I think for quarterback, though, it's always going to be something that you are more than willing to do. Now, not every team's lucky, right? I'll take the 49ers, for example. They wasted 3 first-round picks on Trey Lance. They are lucky that they stumbled into Brock Purdy and they've worked out, but it's risky. I brought up the Jets before. I thought Sam Darnold was going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. And maybe he'll become one now. We don't know. But he stunk with the Jets. They drafted him. I thought Zach Wilson would be a decent quarterback. Jets drafted him. Stunk. So the quarterback position is just incredibly difficult to predict. So I get the concern. And to your point, giving up the extra capital, it's an added risk. I'd say that. Jerry says thoughts on Cooks and Radins and Amadi signings. Well, so let's go through them. Look, Ugo Amadi, I like the depth. Don't mind them kind of having continuity in the back end. I think you need to add veterans. Ugo Amadi's always been kind of like that bench player that when he comes in, you know you're getting his best effort. You know he's a capable player. Not a great player, but he's a capable player. And you know he's not costing you anything. So to me, I can't complain about the Ugo Amadi signing at all. Love it. I think when it comes to adding beef on the O-line, I think for the Saints, look, you go out there, you get your guy in Dylan Radins. I think that he is an interesting piece. He's versatile. You can play him at guard. You can play him at tackle. I'd imagine Saints you're playing him at guard. He's not a special player. There's no trade out there that's going to win this O-line over. But the Saints needed depth at offensive guard. I think the Saints needed depth, period, because right now you got Cesar Ruiz and Nick Saldiveri, who maybe could be good eventually, but he's never healthy. So we don't know what we got in him as fans. And I think Radins will at least help you out in the depth department, especially at offensive guard. God forbid you got to kick him out of tackle. You can. He's got that experience coming from college. So we'll see what happens there. The Brandon Cooks one is interesting because I don't know what version of Brandon Cooks you're getting. If Brandon Cooks is more like his 2023 form, screw it. I think you can get some good production out of him. And I think Brandon Cooks has become a nice, I would say, he's not like a physical receiver, but Brandon Cooks, in my opinion, the Brandon Cooks the Saints had in 2014 is not the same Brandon Cooks anymore. Obviously, age is a factor, not being as fast is a factor. But I would say, in my opinion, you could utilize him a little bit more over the middle of the field than you could have back then when he was first with the Saints. And I know people are upset about that deal. I don't know if he's the player that Saints fans wanted a reunion with. But if you're telling me 2024, the production was so bad for Brandon Cooks because he, A, missed 7 games, and B, didn't have his starting quarterback in Dak Prescott, and that's it, we're going to get closer to the 2023 Brandon Cooks, then he's going to be good depth for the Saints. And I said this on Friday when this deal went down. The Saints at the end of last season were playing a bunch of guys that had no business playing wide receiver, or at least significant minutes, I would say. Kevin Austin Jr. was playing significant minutes. Dante Pettis was getting significant snaps. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who granted became a Saints legend in quick time, is not supposed to be your wide receiver one, and yet he was for the Saints because they were depleted. So to go out there and add depth, I really can't complain about it. I know a lot of people have been complaining about this move, but I just don't know. I'm conflicted on it. 2 years is kind of odd. Thought 1 year would have been nice because if it don't work, he's gone. But 2 year, $13 million. We'll see how it shakes. I just hope he's closer to the 2023 form. Margaret says, I think we'll have a higher pick next year because I see another really bad season ahead. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case because it's a new coaching staff. Like, maybe Kellen Moore is the guy. Maybe he's not. And maybe it is worse, like you said, Margaret. But who knows? If Kellen Moore is the guy, you're probably not winning just 5 games. Probably winning a couple more. Maybe not more than 7, but 7 and 10 is not going to get you a top 5 pick, unfortunately. Play Rattler this season, take Arch next season. Again, so I've been called a Saints, not Saints hater. Obviously, I'm not a Saints hater. I'm sitting here freaking talking about the Saints right now. I've been called a Spencer Rattler hater because I've just tried to pump the brakes on what he can be. I think the ship, though, for the Saints to just play Rattler this season and sink or swim with him has kind of sailed. It doesn't mean Spencer Rattler can't become a starter. I want to make that very clear. But I think if the Saints were going to go that route and play Spencer Rattler this year, then that you would have seen the kind of footprints of that move lay out in front of you. You probably would have cut Derek Carr or tried to move him. And you would have went full steam ahead with Spencer Rattler. It doesn't seem like they are. And I think the Saints quarterback room is going to be vastly different. I think you're probably going to add a quarterback at some point in this draft. Would not be surprised if they do. I think you're getting rid of Jake Haener, which ain't exactly a loss after what we saw last year. And you go from there. But I think the whole play Rattler, see how he does. If you don't do well, you can take Arch next year. You can still take Arch next year. No one's stopping you. But the Rattler equation, I think that part is done for the moment. I don't think the Saints are going to do that sink or swim thing with him. Yellowno says Dart is a mid-second, early third-round pick. This is what I would say about Jackson Dart. There are quarterbacks who are going to rise up boards now, I think, because of Bo Nix, right? Because Bo Nix last year, a lot of people said day 2 pick, and then as the draft kept getting closer, Bo Nix could be a first-round pick. Bo could be a mid-first-round pick. And before you know it, within the first 12 picks of the draft, the Denver Broncos take Bo Nix. Here is the problem, though. And I thought Bo Nix probably improved more than any other rookie quarterback last year. Reason being, as great as Jaden Daniels was special like the moment he entered the league, right? Like you saw with Jaden first month of the season, oh, okay, he's going to settle. Bo Nix kind of struggled early, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, there you go. That pick didn't work. And then he was getting a little better, then good. And then by the end of the season, he looked like a really impressive quarterback. Do you have your Sean Payton, though? You don't got your coach. You can draft Jackson Dart and think that he's going to be the Bo Nix of this year's class, and it's not going to work if you don't have your coach. And I also don't know if Jackson Dart, in my opinion, can be Bo Nix, where, man, Bo came in and it's tough to develop the way he did month by month, getting that much better. So I don't know. I don't think Jackson Dart's a bad player at all. I actually think he's got some talent to him. It all comes down to vision and if you have the right coach. Look, if Kellen Moore's the right coach, you might be getting your starting quarterback out of him if that's the case. Ed says, man, cut Carr and take the hit. I don't want him on the team. He never embraced the city. F him. Look, I think the Carr situation is so interesting, right? It's almost like the two sides. Well, not the two sides. The Saints aren't ghosting him, but it feels like he's almost ghosting the Saints at this moment. And again, I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, so I have to preface by that. I don't have any inside sources on this. Just pay attention to this situation. I don't think we're done yet with the Derek Carr situation in the way that, think about this offseason. He wanted out. They kept him. Then the report comes out from ESPN. He was more than willing to see who's on the open market. Of course he was. I mean, I think there was going to be options for him. And now we have shifted to late March. We have not heard from him, even though he's going to be the starter. And the biggest topic is, Saints like Cam Ward. Saints might trade up for Cam Ward. Yeah, I'm sure the Derek Carr camp is absolutely loving that right now. They're not. And I just think there's going to be something here. Xavier says, I feel like Carr is a draft day trade, maybe a late second rounder. I'll say this about Derek Carr. I know a lot of people are anti-Derek Carr, and I just don't even have an opinion on Derek Carr to really give you my take on. I just think he's a middle quarterback. I don't think he's great. Don't think he's bad, though. I think he's a solid quarterback, and there's moments where he looks good. Because of the way the Saints have kind of coughed up money to him, if the Saints were to go trade up for Cam Ward and make a big move, and they got to recoup assets, or let's say they don't. Let's say they just take Shador or Jackson Dart at 9, and they want to start them next year. You probably could get a day 2 pick for Derek Carr, even if it's a third-round pick, because that team taking him on, you're going to spend $1 million on him. $1 million on him. And you don't have to like Derek Carr. You could be the biggest Derek Carr hater in the world. You can't tell me that that's not a bargain, just $1 million, because the Saints are paying the other 39. You can't tell me that's not a bargain. So I actually do believe you can get a day 2 pick for him, probably late day 2. But because of the way this has played out and the Saints have shelled a lot of money, I think it'd go that way. 99 Dog says, I wouldn't trade up, draft some playmakers with the first and second round picks. Look, I don't mind that idea either. The Saints need playmakers. Everyone says, hey, Chris, would you want them to get a wide receiver, running back, tight end? Give me all 3 positions for this Saints team. They need help. Denzel says, Carr doesn't embrace the culture of the city whatsoever. He doesn't have the attitude. He doesn't embrace the fan base. He's just there. Yeah, and even right now, it's almost like he doesn't even feel like he's just there. Before he was just there. Now it's like, oh, it's kind of odd. 99 Dog says, I see they're meeting with Quinn Ewers. Yeah, look, the Saints are doing their homework. The Saints are doing their homework on this quarterback class. Dinner with Quinn Ewers. Obviously have interest in Cam Ward. There's been some Shador whispers, but the Shador situation is so complicated, right? Like, I think for Shador, even Dion the other day was talking about how he wants New York for his son. So it's a little interesting. I don't know what's going to happen with that situation, but I'm sure the Saints will definitely, whether it's behind closed doors or it comes out, we'll meet with him at some point. I would be shocked if they don't. Jackson Dart, they've been linked to him since the Senior Bowl, and apparently they liked him at the Senior Bowl. So the Saints are doing their homework on this quarterback class. There's no question about it. Jerry G says Carr definitely wants out, but good old Loomis is too stupid and senile to keep him. 328 is a very special day, that's for sure. Well, we got 3 more days to celebrate that. Montauk says Bears were only able to get that because Bryce was considered more of a once every few years quarterback prospect coming out of college. Ward is a very good quarterback prospect in a weak draft. I don't disagree with that, but here is the thing. I think, when it comes to trades, there's the point system for picks. I believe you're going to have to match that value, though. That's just the way today's NFL goes. So, I think you're still going to have to give up a lot. Maybe it's not the exact trade that the Panthers gave up, but you're giving up pick number 9. You're giving up next year's first. You're giving up at least two day two selections, whether they're second or third rounders. I think you're giving up a third rounder. Reason I say that is Panthers, let me pull up the pick against that it was. The Panthers gave up pick 61. The Saints, their second round pick this year is pick 40. Pick 40's got way more value than pick 61. So you're probably giving up pick 70, pick 71 this year? Maybe some extra change along the way, but you're going to have to give up a good haul. It's not going to be a light trade package if they were to go up and make the move. That's for sure. Nat says, I think the Saints will make the playoffs because last year, you guys were all for them make the playoffs this year. No, I think the playoffs are very attainable. I don't think they're not attainable, especially in this division. And look, if Kellen Moore is the guy, Saints are going to be playing better football. I do think, though, the reason I wouldn't pick the Saints to make the playoffs, and I'd feel pretty confident about not picking them to make the playoffs, is I just think this roster has a lot of holes right now. I don't love the defensive line, interior or even on the edge. I don't love the cornerback room right now. There's questions like, who's Alante Taylor? Can he play on the outside? Is he exclusively a great slot corner? Kool-Aid McKinstry, is he going to take that next step? I personally think he's going to, but is he? Safety position. You add Justin Reed. I think that's a huge benefit, though. We'll see what that position group gives you. Linebacker. DeMario Davis getting a little older. Can Pete Werner be that guy that we all know he's capable of being, but he has not shown it to a full extent in a while? That's a question. Now flip it over to the offense. Are your tackles going to get better? If so, great. Saints are going to look really good next year running the football. Guard play. Cesar Ruiz trending downward. Dylan Radins, is that going to be your other guy? Maybe. Eric McCoy, can he stay healthy? We saw how big the absence was for him last year. And then when it comes to the offense, if Derek Carr's your quarterback, okay. Derek's missed time the last couple of years for the Saints. You got to factor that in. So do you have a good backup plan if he misses time? Wide receiver group. Olave's missed time. Do you have a backup plan? Rashid's missed time. Do you have a backup plan? Tight end room. I think you need help there. So I think the Saints still have a lot of holes, and I would not be picking them to make the playoffs, but I also don't believe that the Saints are far out in the NFC South because I don't think the NFC South's that good. Montauk says we'll probably have to trade Olave eventually because of the concussions. I do think it's a discussion they're going to have, because it's a lot of money you're going to have to give up. Paper Chaser 5386 says, I don't understand the complaint about rebuilding. We're actually trying to win. Trying to rebuild is not guaranteed success. Ask the Jets and the coach and the Colts. Different coaching and coaching matters. Yeah, for sure. To your Jets point, right? Like I said, we've seen them blow top 5 picks and good rosters year after year. I mean, even last year, right? Supposed to be a good year. You brought in Aaron Rodgers. He's finally healthy. You have talent. Okay. Still the same crap. Forgive says, I believe people are asking for something they really don't want. People want the Saints to blow it up, but the Saints have one of the most impatient fan bases and will be screaming, fire Kellen Moore. You know what's funny? I think there's already some Saints fans who are frustrated with Kellen Moore, which to me is insane because, A, he hasn't coached a damn game, and B, what are you getting mad about? We knew they were going to keep Derek Carr for financial reasons, and they did that. It was the easiest way for them to be cap compliant, so they went that route. People were mad about them bringing back Juwan Johnson. They believe that was a knock on Kellen Moore. So I do agree Saints fans are impatient. I myself, I'm a very impatient human being. But when it comes to Kellen Moore, and I said this at the time of the press conference, and I'm going to hold true to it. And if anyone notices that I don't, please expose my ass. I'm giving him the full first year. And after the first full year, it's fair game. Whatever he did well, whatever he didn't do well, we'll talk about it. And we'll talk about it over the course of the season, whether he's improving, whether he's not improving. But I want to give him that first year. I don't think it's really fair for now the youngest head coach in the NFL to not have a little bit of leniency, Montauk says, why would you not blow it up, seeing as you've been losing, trying to keep overpriced veterans and still not making the playoffs for 4 years? It's giving delusional. Rebuild doesn't mean can't win. A team full of young, fresh players with talent could be a good group to win with a young coaching staff. Look, I think part of the problem for the Saints is they're not, especially in terms of the contracts that they have, they're not built in a way where they can just shed salary overnight. They got to trade guys, It's going to cost them. If they want to cut guys, it's got to be post June 1st. You can't post June 1st, everyone. You're going to do it for 2. So it's not an easy scenario. Saints have, because of the way the contract's structured and kicking stuff down the road, you're going to have to make some moves. Michael says, would you move up 2 picks for T-Mac? Truthfully, no, but I think that's just because I think the Saints have so many needs. I think I'd rather just let them sit at 9, see what the board's shaking up to be, and go from there. Because look, if I pull up the guys that won't be on the board for the Saints, Cam Ward won't be there, Abdul Carter won't be there, Travis Hunter won't be there. I don't think Ashton Genty's going to be there. I really think he's going to the Raiders. I really do. So let's just say he's off the board. Shador might be off the board, maybe to the Giants. So that's 5 guys gone right there. Wouldn't be surprised if Will Campbell's off the board. First off, I think Ted McMillan can get to you. I think he could. Now, look, you got to worry about the Panthers. I think the Panthers might take Tet, so I think there's a concern there. But the Saints got a lot of needs right now, and whether you sit back at 9 and take a Will Johnson, or even a player that I don't necessarily want the Saints to take at 9 just because of the positional need, Tyler Warren, like you can get a playmaker at 9 and not have to give up picks because I think the board will shake out in a certain way. Now, if you tell me that they have Tet McMillan ranked way higher than other guys, then yeah, fine, make the move. But I don't know if they will. I really don't. Derek says, I'm tired of people talking about playmakers and quarterbacks. We need more starters on both lines before we think about that stuff in the draft. If Campbell's there, they should run to the podium. I don't disagree with getting better in the trenches, Derek. They have to get better in the trenches. I don't know, though, if Will Campbell's the guy for the Saints. Like, I haven't really heard anything yet on that front and whether or not they really value him. Looking at the team roster, they need all their picks to add depth. That's been killing the team for a while. I say no trading up to get Cam Ward. They could trade down to get more picks. I would love for them to trade down. I'd love for them to trade down. But Mickey Loomis never does it. So, like, I don't want to get my hopes up. But I do agree with that aspect, right? Like, for the Saints, if they could just accumulate a bunch of picks for next year's draft, for this year's draft, man, I think it's great for their team. I don't know if they're going to do it. I don't think they will. Montauk says, without playmakers and quarterbacks, you still ain't winning, even with the perfect offensive line. No, but the Saints need to get better in the trenches, no doubt. Praise YJ says, Shador is better than Cam Ward. Don't buy the hype. They just hate Shador. Theo Vaughn's dumbass just dropped a mock draft and has Shador going in the second round. Well, that's not happening. That's not happening. I mean, I think Shador's floor, like the worst it gets for him, is pick number 9 to the Saints. Like, I think that's the lowest he goes. Now, do I think Shador is a top 10 prospect? I don't know. I don't love this quarterback class. Even Cam, like I said, I think Cam has like the wow factor to some degree. But I'm not certain it's going to work. You know, I don't have a lot of conviction because quarterback position is so scary. But Shador's not going second round. I mean, he's going to go first round. Praise YJ says, I'm on every Saints channel. Thank you for your work, brother. I'll be here. I'm standing on. Shador is way better than Cam Ward. Watch. Look, I think if you're looking for that point guard of your offense, I think Shador is the guy to take. If you're looking for that guy that's going to maybe shoulder a little bit more of a workload and there's a lot more on him, I think Cam Ward might be your guy. I'm not going to really, again, I think Cam Ward is the best quarterback in this class, but I think Shador, we've reached the point where Shador is either overhated or overhyped. And part of that is because who he is, right? His last name Sanders. There is that factor to it. But he does have good traits. And like I said before at the top of the show, I do think there are moments where he reminds me of Jared Goff. And for anyone that thinks it's an insult, like, I think Jared Goff's a really good quarterback. Jared Goff has been to a Super Bowl before. Granted, us Saints fans don't acknowledge that one. The Lions have been really good because he's helped out that offense and has been their kind of floor general. So I think Shador is a good quarterback. I just don't know where he's going to end up going. I think it's going to be Giants, but a little bit of an unknown. Justin says, if you were the GM, what would you give up for Ward? Well, I'm just going to go off the history has told you. And I think you're giving up the first round pick this year. I think you're giving up first round pick next year, a day 2 pick this year, a day 2 pick next year, and probably Chris Olave. I think that's what you're giving up. So if you're comfortable with making that move, you go for it. And if not, all right, you got to figure out your quarterback situation. Montauk says, I don't get the fan base fear of drafting a franchise quarterback high. This is getting ridiculous every year, saying wait till the next year to draft a quarterback. It's also tough because the Saints have not picked top 5. Like they're always out of that ballpark where you kind of have to just move up, and you got to go for it. So that's kind of where we're at. Jaden says, if I'm the Saints, I would not trade up for the first overall pick. I would not do that trade. I would stay at 9. I would wait to get the quarterback of the future in the 2026 NFL draft. That seems to be the popularity so far, the popular pick, I'd say. Derek says the team will probably be better overall, but this is an even higher injury chance. The same damn roster as last year. Yeah, look, you change up certain aspects of it, but you kind of just, you're taking your car for a paint job. The car's the same. You're just taking it for a paint job. Montauk says Kellen Moore's a damn good coach of quarterbacks. He is. The history's there for sure. Yellownosis, I think it's set up to draft Nussmeier's son. I don't know, man. I don't know if that's what the Saints are going for. I don't know if that's gonna persuade me into buying in. Garrett makes a really good throw 1 minute and then a really stupid decision the next, and it's kind of frustrating. Carr hasn't said a word, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that Rattler could be the starter this year. You said it could happen if Carr was moved. I think he still could be. Look, I think if they move Carr, though, I think it's because they're getting their guy, whether it's Cam or Shador or Jackson Dart. Like, I think that's where they would move him. And maybe I'm wrong. Again, I'm just speculating, but I think that's where they move him. It's not a knock on Spencer. I just don't know if Spencer's going to start a lot this year, bearing injuries. Like, if an injury happens, Spencer's going to get in there, but I just don't know if he's going to start this year. I really don't. Forgive says the Saints will draft a quarterback in the first round. I think they get Warren, and they paid Johnson to be the bigger receiver type because he's not really a tight end. It's possible. Look, I don't hate that idea. I don't. But it's got to work out. Denzel says Derek Carr gives me Brandon Ingram vibes. Stop holding on to him. Just let him go. The longer you keep him, much like BI, the value plummets. The funny thing is, I think the value almost kind of went up right now because the Saints just paid all the money for his contract. It's ridiculous, but like, I feel like the value to a degree went up. Justin says, I really believe Carr will be traded. We'll see what happens. Forgive says, why does everyone think they just cut all the vets and fill the roster with all rookies in UDFA? Can anyone name one team that has ever done that? Now, that shit doesn't happen. And it's not going to happen, you know? If it was... First off, if you do that, the product's going to be so freaking bad. Like, I know the product's been bad for the Saints the last couple of years, but we're talking about, like, unwatchable product. Like, take the worst games from this past season, like the Broncos Thursday night game. Like, that for 17 games, you will go mad. You'll go absolutely mad, and that's what you would have. Greg says, I don't like the idea of giving up next year's first-rounder pick, i.e. Jalen Carter. I get it. I understand that, man. Justin with the super chat, thank you so much for the support, says, all this quarterback talk makes me feel like Carr is going to be traded soon. Look, I don't know if he will. I really don't know if he will. All I'm saying is that he has not said anything yet, and look, the Saints have paid a lot of money. The Saints have paid him a lot of money. And I think for New Orleans, if they're going to move on and get their quarterback of the future, you might be able to trade him for a decent pick. You might be able to. So we'll see. I don't know if Derek Carr is really going to get traded. I just think that anyone who thinks that this situation is normal right now is kind of being in denial about it. Like, what other starting quarterback is kind of quiet about everything going on? You haven't said anything about your new coach, haven't said anything about the restructure. And the only comment we've gotten from him this year, remember, is that he's not taking a pay cut. That's it. So I think that that's going to be something for me that I'm going to monitor. I'm definitely going to monitor. Tay says, don't need another Hayner or Ian Book. We haven't drafted a quarterback in first round since 1971, I think. I believe that is the statistic. They don't need another mid-round quarterback. I do agree with you on that. They've gone that route, and they don't need another one. Daver says, any chance we have the highest paid backup in Carr with all the Rattler media coverage? It looks more like he's our guy. Look, I don't think Rattler is the guy for them. You know, could he be? Maybe. I don't think that that's their belief right now. Will they keep Carr at that money? I don't know. My guess is no. My guess is no. As a backup, absolutely not. I don't think they will. I don't think, by the way, I don't think the Falcons are keeping Kirk Cousins at that money. They can say whatever they want. I think Kirk Cousins will be traded between now and the start of the NFL season. I do not buy these teams that are trying to tell you that they're okay paying $40 million for their backup. No way in hell. Trey says, would you like Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas? Look, I think he fits the height that you're looking for, a big-bodied wide receiver. Maybe a question about separation. I wonder if that is the type of receiver that Kellen Moore is looking for. I think that's a question. Clearly, Kellen Moore is going to value speed. I don't know if you're going to necessarily get that type of speed with Armstrong in terms of what Kellen Moore is looking for his offense. So I think that's a question. Now, I think his 40 was fine. I think it was like a 4 or 5 something. But, he's a big body dude. And I think that if you're telling me I could add a 6'4" wide receiver to a group with a lot of, twitchy speed type of guys, I don't mind it. I don't know where the Saints are at with him, though, in their process, I guess, for evaluating talent. But look, Andrew Armstrong had a really nice season last year. He's an all SEC dude. Wouldn't mind adding a big-bodied wide receiver for sure. Praise says, if we go Dart at 9, use RPO college-style offense, I think he could be our Bo Nix. They're pretty similar. Yeah, I think Dart's athleticism is kind of, in my opinion, gone a little under the radar. Like you see some pro comps to Jalen Hurts, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't see it. Look, I think Jalen Hurts is a better runner, but Jackson Dart's a pretty athletic quarterback. It kind of almost goes under the radar. I do believe that they could have success with him. I don't know if he'll be the pick at 9, though. Jaden says, hey, if you're a GM for the Saints, what would you do with the team with the 9 overall picks? Look, I mean, they have needs everywhere. So kind of letting the board play out. I would say as the draft goes along, I do think the Saints should add a running back. I talked about O-line before. They got to get better. Obviously, D-line, they got to get better. Got to add a pass catcher. But if they don't walk away from this draft class with a running back, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. This is a really good running back class. It doesn't even need to be, the big name guy. It doesn't need to be the big name guy. Everyone talk about, they love Ashton Genty. I get it. But it doesn't need to be Genty. It doesn't need to be Hampton from North Carolina. It doesn't need to be, even though I love Trevion Henderson, doesn't need to be him. Like, if you go get me Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, or you get me RJ Harvey from UCF, like, I can live with that. Like, I think that's fine. The Saints don't have to go get themselves a running back super early in the draft, but go get yourself an option to take some of the pressure off Alvin Kamara. Montauk says, Cam Ward, please, the can kicking needs to stop now. I mean, I feel you. I feel on the can kicking for sure. Praise YJ says, I kind of like the Rattler idea because Kellen Moore has never chosen a quarterback. He's only made the quarterback better. Hurts, Herbert, Dak. He's C for 3. I trust him to pick a QB, but history says he uses Rattler. He's never handpicked a quarterback. He has never handpicked a quarterback. He's also never been a head coach, though. That's the only thing I would say. You aren't wrong about that. Like, he's inherited every quarterback situation. He's inherited pretty good ones, too. Obviously, with Dak. Dak's injuries have concerned me now, but when he had Dak was mobile. Obviously, Herbert's a really talented quarterback. In my opinion, one of the 5 most talented quarterbacks in the league. And then Hurts, who just came off a Super Bowl performance. Hurts is a really good quarterback. But when you're the head coach and you're calling the shots, I'd imagine you can handpick your guy. And again, this isn't to say that he doesn't like what the Saints have. I don't know. I really don't know what his thoughts are right now on this group. But I think he's going to go get his guy. At some point, it doesn't have to be this year. It could be next year. But he's going to pick his quarterback. Forgive says, does Carr even fit Kellen's system? Because if you look, it's always a quarterback that has good to decent mobility. Dak, Herbert, and Hurts. I think Kellen would be able to get good football out of Derek Carr. Run the football well. A lot of crossers. The only thing is, it's a little different from what Derek's done the last year. Saints were don't get me wrong, running the football, but Saints took their shots downfield. I don't know how many Kellen's going to take. I think he could with Derek. Derek's got a really good arm. Can he be that methodical quarterback, though? I don't know. I don't know. But I do believe that he'd get good quarterback play out of him. I'd be shocked if he looked like crap with Kellen Moore. He just came off. Look, Derek had good games last year. He also had some bad games. We had some good games. I think that Kellen Moore could get consistency out of him. Greg says, what do you think of Raheem Sanders? Look, truthfully, man, I haven't watched a ton of his tape. I also didn't watch a lot of South Carolina last year. So, like, that to me is where I guess I hit my flaw. But look, if he is a true 3-down guy and you feel like he's got proper burst, I can't complain. I just said they got to add a running back. So if that's the running back they choose, who am I to complain? Beggars can't be choosers. I'm just begging for them to take a running back. Montauk says, now, if we could have gotten Dart in the second, it would be golden. But thanks to Mel Kiper, doesn't look like he'll be there in the second. Yeah, I think he'll go first round. Who do you want the Saints to draft at 9? I want the Saints to take Ashton Genty with the pick. Who do you want them? Look, I know it's a cop-out answer. I really don't have a clear-cut demand. If they took McMillan at 9, I'd be cool with it. If they took Will Johnson at 9, I'd be cool with it. If they went and took Will Campbell at 9, I don't think they will, I'd be cool with it. If they took Ashton Genty at 9, I'd be cool with it. They took Tyler Warren at 9. All right, maybe be a little annoyed because I don't like taking tight ends in the top 10, but he's a good player. I would live with it. So there's a bubble of who the Saints could take, and we'll kind of go from there. You know, some people have mentioned Shamar Stewart. I don't know. I get a little concerned, but the Saints have options. You know, they have options, and I'm interested to see where they go. I don't think they're going to go with one of the Georgia edge rushers, whether it's Walker or Williams, but there's a bubble that the Saints can go out there and get their guy. Sierra says, any thoughts on Cam Scatterbo? I mean, he's a versatile playmaker. I think that Cam has elevated his game in the big spots. You know, I go back to the Texas college football playoff game. Like, he looked really good, and he played his heart off. I mean, puking his guts on the sideline, but I don't know if that's who the Saints are going to get as that running back. I think they need speed, man, and I think they're going to value speed. So I think that he's probably not their guy, but I could be wrong. Montauk says, wait, I just saw they had lunch with Quinn Ewers. Ew. I mean, yeah, I don't love Quinn's game, but you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with them going out and having that dinner. A, you're learning more about the quarterback. B, you want to find out, right? Like, because Quinn's had moments where he struggled in college. I do want to throw out there, though, he has played hurt the last 2 years, especially last season. Like, he just played last season hurt. And that oblique injury is nothing to mess around with. I could see him being a solid NFL quarterback. The problem is I don't know if his ceiling's high. Like, I think Quinn could be a Derek Carr type quarterback. I really do. Is that the quarterback you want to aspire to have? I don't know. But I think Quinn could be a good NFL quarterback. I just don't know if it's a super, super high ceiling guy. And I don't know with the Saints if that's the quarterback you're taking and putting all the pressure on him. I don't know if that would work. Praise Why just says you got to go BPA with this roster. I agree wholeheartedly. Japanese Hercules says Ollie Gordon in round 3 wouldn't be a bad pick. I mean, look, I love Gordon. Kind of took a little bit of a hit this year. You look at him the year before, production-wise, off the charts. So I'd be cool with that. Again, this is a very big running back class. There's a lot of depth. Saints can go out there and get themselves a playmaker, and I hope to God they do, because Lord knows they need one. So we'll see what happens. Right now, obviously, the conversation is going to be so quarterback-centric and what the Saints decide to do. If they try to make up a move to get into the top 5 and get themselves their quarterback of the future, where they stand pat at 9, can still take a quarterback there, or just say, to hell with it, we're not taking a quarterback this year. Derek is going to play for us whether he likes it or not, and we're going to go out there and get the best player available at 9. It's a possibility. But the Cam Ward situation is really, really fascinating, and I don't know. It's going to be something to watch and monitor for sure. Praise YJ with the super chat. Thank you so much for the support. Says, thank you for all your hard work and amazing content, G. Man, I really appreciate it. You didn't have to do that. It is greatly appreciated, though. I really do love talking with you guys. And look, you guys kind of, I know I'm the one yapping, but you guys are kind of playing the role of the captain and steering the ship in whatever direction you guys wanted to go. So really appreciate you guys and all the comments you guys have had today. Jaden says, when the Saints hired Kellen Moore, I was very happy with it. I think he'll be a great coach for us. He's an offensive genius. I hope he is a great coach. I really do hope he's a great coach. And look, Kellen's coming off the best year of his career because, in my opinion, the Eagles had that shift mid-season where they said, hey, to hell with it. We are running the football. We are running the football, and that is that. We're going to be a ground and pound team work. And yet, the 2 best games of Kellen Moore's career as a play caller so far, NFC Championship game, Super Bowl. No better time to do it than then. Hakeem says, I like Mason Taylor from LSU in round 3, but I believe he's a top 50 player. Yeah, look, I think Mason Taylor's a guy that the Saints should have high on their radar. I talked about him a couple weeks ago where if they were able to get their hands on him, I think it'd be a nice pick. Would satisfy the people that want LSU players too. So a little bit of a double whammy, but I do think Mason Taylor is a good player. You know, I mentioned the running back class before. The tight end class is really good. I'd like to think the Saints go get themselves a tight end in this class, whether it is, you know, Tyler Warren at 9 would be really rich. But, obviously Colston from Michigan's an incredible player. Mason Taylor's great. Arroyo from Miami's really good. The Bowling Green tight end, Harold's really good. Garner Helm athletically is not going to fit the mold for the Saints, but I liked watching him in college. I thought he was a good tight end. So, look, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of options for the Saints, and we'll see where they choose to go. But anyway, guys, it's been a thrilling 1 hour with you guys. You guys have been awesome. We really appreciate all the comments, the super chats, all the support you guys have given. You guys have been the best. We will have more content later this week. Hopefully the Saints do something this week, give us a little juice to get going. But you guys have been terrific on this Tuesday. I can't thank you enough for joining and tuning into this show. Make sure if you guys haven't already to subscribe to Boot Crew Media's YouTube page. We'll have more content coming out later this week and this upcoming month of April. Obviously with the draft, we'll get things rolling for sure. And until then, guys, stay tuned for more content here from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.